2000s book, but it is very good and I enjoyed it. Mainly because it is about cats and I grew up with a lot of cats. And then the last book I'm going to be reading is Guess How Much I Love You, which I feel like is such a classic book. And I also loved this book so much growing up because one of my favorite animals for a long time were bunny rabbits. And I really, really wanted one, but I never ended up getting one because bunnies and cats don't really go good together. So anyway, we're going to get into the reading now. Okay, so our first book is going to be, oh my gosh, Mrs. Mcnosh. Mrs. Mcnosh took a walk in the park. Her dog saw a squirrel and started to bark. "Stop barking, stop pulling," said Nellie Mcnosh. But George wouldn't listen. So, oh my gosh, he zipped through the flowers and zipped through the trees, barking at bicycles, babies, and bees. He dove and he wove right past Mrs. Mcnosh. "I'll get you," cried Nellie, but then, oh my gosh. The boat sprang a leak, so George had to jump out. "I'll get you," cried Nellie. She caught a big trout. He crashed through a wedding and trashed the buffet. "I'll get you," cried Nellie. She caught the bouquet. "Come back here right now," hollered Mrs. Mcnosh. But George kept running until, oh my gosh, he bumped the plump umpire, then jumped the stone wall. "I'll catch you," cried Nellie. She caught a fly ball. He danced and he pranced house all alone, and there on the porch she saw George's old bone. "I wish he'd come back," sniffled Mrs. Mcnosh. Then she opened the door, and she cried. Oh my gosh. Okay. So the next book is going to be Where is That Cat? And I also absolutely love the illustrations in this book. They're done by Loretta Krupinski. One snowy day, Miss Perkins went out to get her mail. She found one letter, 2 bills, and a cat. "Hello, cat," she said. "What's your name?" Just then, a snowflake landed on the cat's nose. "Fitz," he sneezed. "Fitz," said Miss Perkins. "That's a good name." "Well, you'd better come in, Fitz. It's too cold out here for you." She took him into the kitchen and gave him some tuna and a bowl of milk. "Now, Fitz," she said, "you cannot stay here. I like to keep my house neat and tidy. So I don't want a cat, but I will put an ad in the newspaper and find a good home." The ad ran in the evening paper. "Wanted. Good home for a fluffy cat named Fitz." The next day, a man and a little girl arrived. "We've come to see the cat," they said. "Fine," said Miss Perkins. "Now, where is that cat?" She looked all around. She said, "No, Fitz." "Thank you anyway," said the man and the little girl, and they left. That night, Fitz curled up on the rug beside Miss Perkins' bed and began to purr. "My, that sounds nice," said Miss Perkins, and she fell asleep. The next day, a woman and a little boy arrived. "We've come to see the cat," they said. "Fine," said Miss Perkins. "Now where is that cat?" She looked all around. She said, "No, Fitz." "Thank you anyway," said the woman and the little boy, and they left. and she left. "Did you hear that, Fitz?" called Miss Perkins. "I have decided to keep you. You are my clever, brave, remarkable cat." She looked all around. "Now, where is my cat?" And Fitz purred, "Home." The end. Okay. And the final book we have to read is Guess How Much I Love You. Little Nut Brown Hare, who was going to bed, held on tight to Big Nut Brown Hare's very long ears. He wanted to be sure that Big Nut Brown Hare was listening. "Guess how much I love you," he said. "Oh, I don't think I could guess that," said Big Nut Brown Hare. "This much," said Little Nut Brown Hare, stretching his arms as wide as they could go. Big that's good hopping, thought Little Nut Brown Hare. I wish I could hop like that. I love you all the way down the lane, as far as the river, cried Little Nut Brown Hare. I love you across the river and over the hills, said Big Nut Brown Hare. That's very far, thought Little Nut Brown Hare. He was almost too sleepy to think any more. Then he looked beyond the thorn bushes, out into the dark night. Nothing could be farther than the sky. I love you right up to the moon, he said, and closed his eyes. Oh, that's very far, said Big Nut Brown Hare. That is very, very far. Big Nut Brown Hare settled Little Nut Brown Hare into his bed of leaves, leaned over, and kissed him good night. Then he lay down close by and whispered with a smile,